Hi everybody, welcome to our DAT IQ Weekly Market Update. This is our update for October the 1st, episode 310. Lots happening in the freight market. I'm Dean Croak, market analyst here at DAT, along with co-host Chad Kennedy, and very special guest today, Heather Dawn, VP and COO of Dawn Transfer in Illinois. Good morning. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, what a day to be on talking about the freight market, Heather.
Right.
Yeah, we've got strike action. We've still got the remnants of the container load of lithium batteries falling over last week in the port of Los Angeles and catching fire and shutting down a number of terminals. Then, of course, we've got the ILA strike happening as of midnight tonight. So there's lots to talk about. And, of course, the tragic event that's unfolding in the Carolinas right now with the recovery effort for the Hurricane Helene that went through there last week. Even Ben, our producer, sitting in the background, has been impacted by this without phone and power and all sorts of horrible things happening there. So, Heather, for those that haven't seen you on our show before, let us know a little bit about what you do at Dawn Transfer.
Well, my name is Heather Dorn. I'm the Executive Vice President and Chief Commercial Officer at Dawn Transfer. I'm in charge of everything as to how we go to market. So sales, marketing, customer service, pricing, IT, and finance. Dawn Transfer is an LTL carrier based in the Midwest. We are the best in the Midwest. We handle all of the Iowa, Illinois, Missouri, Indiana, Nebraska, Kansas, and Minnesota states. And we were started in 1921 by my great-grandpa.
Great story. Fascinating. Yeah. So Quad Cities is home, correct?
That's right.
Yeah, Rock Island.
Yep.
I've just realized that when I was looking at your information this morning, I was out there at the Iowa 80 truck show a few weeks ago, and I was remiss in not calling by to say hello.
We have the largest truck stop in the world in Iowa.
That's where it was, yeah. My truck got covered in tar on the way out there, so I wasn't in a very good mood for the truck show.
Oh. It is a fun event, though.
Yeah.
A lot of people in.
Yeah, all right. Chad, how's things going? You escaped Hurricane Helene being further south in Florida?
We did. We dodged a bullet. It hit west of us, obviously St. Petersburg, Clearwater, and everything north of there. Took a pretty big hit and all the way up the coast. Just a quick plug for American Logistics Aid Network. It's acronym is ALLEN. You can Google ALLEN Logistics and find them. So they try to bring together logistics companies, trucking and supply chain companies to help in situations like this. So their leadership's based out of Lakeland, where I'm at, associated with Saddle Creek. So yeah, plug for them. Hopefully we can get some help to these people.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll bring Heather back in a little bit later. I'll quickly go through the market updates so we can cover the more important things that are happening. Some of the key trends we're watching: national average spot rates were flat last week. The southeast region, where the hurricane had the biggest impact, rates are up about 2 cents a mile. Flatbed continues to track with 2017. We'll dig into that a little bit later. Other news: ATA tonnage index came out last week, up for the second consecutive month. That's good news, potentially signaling an upward trend in the trucking industry. That's for hire on the large carrier tonnage side of the market. ACT Research for hire volume index also came out last week. Tim DeNoyer produces that. It was up 4.8 points in August. Again, another data point that reflects the improvement. Last week, we reported about the Michigan State University truckload ton mile index was up also. So 3 or 4 data points are starting to line up with our expectation that we'll see some tailwinds heading into the peak shipping season towards the end of the year. Of course, Hurricane Helene came through last week. It's still a recovery effort underway now. Tragically, a lot of people have lost their lives and many are still missing. Oil production took a hit. Oil prices went up a little bit last night, so no major impact on the supply of crude oil and diesel, although there are still a lot of power outages. I expect more delays as this unfolds. I-40 was washed away at the Tennessee-North Carolina state line last week. Hundreds of roads have still closed. So this is an unfolding story as the list of missing continues to grow. We'll keep our eye on that and maybe report back on a little bit more detail next week. In this week's market update, we're talking about the $15 billion trucker detention problem. Also more details on the truckload tonne-mile index, and then talking about the transition of produce volumes into the Philly market as South America produce comes online. All right, so let's dive into the market update and talk about our load-to-truck ratio. It was end of month, end of quarter. Shipping volumes were up in the build-up to peak shipping season. So again, seasonally not surprising to see volumes up about 5%. Equipment posts were down at the end of the month. Again, we always see that happening. Load to truck ratio was a little bit higher, up to 3.82 last week. In the South Bend region, Big Bend region of Florida, load posts were up about 16%. And in Tallahassee, where Hurricane Helene made landfall, we saw load post volumes surge by a similar number. So a little bit of action down there last week on the load posting side. Similar effect in reefer and flatbed in that Tallahassee market. In the broader national reefer market, load postings were up 6% last week, still down about 20% compared to last month. Equipment posts were down 10%, load to truck ratio up 20% to 6.35. And in flatbed, the number of loads posted last week up 6% last week. That's bringing volumes in flatbed very close to where we were last year, just 2% behind. So a little bit of growth in the flatbed market we're seeing on the load post side. Equipment post down also last week, load to truck ratio up to 13.35. That marks the 6th consecutive week of gains in the flatbed ratio, and it's very similar, as you can see on the chart, to what some of the data points we saw around 2017 as that 2018 flatbed rally started. Having a look at our year-over-year look at spot rates, dry van rates stayed about 3 cents a mile below the 3-month trailing average. Last week, the national average was flat at just $1.61 per mile. Again, that's a little bit unusual. Normally, we see a little bit more of a lift at the end of month, end of quarter, but they've been flat at $1.61, excluding fuel, for about the 3rd week. That's 2 cents a mile higher than last year and about 5 cents a mile higher than 2019. And in refrigerated, the line haul rate remained unchanged also last week, averaging $1.97. That's 4 cents a mile higher than the national average for the same week last year. And in flatbed, very similar trend there. You can see we're tracking along with 2017 very closely. I'm sure that's just coincidental, but the flatbed numbers are looking very much like 2017. They've been doing that for a little bit of time now. The average was about $1.99. That's about 8 cents a mile higher than last year. So let's have a look at our forecast. We've got our new ratecast forecasts out at the moment. This is the short term out to 35 days. These are for loads over 550 miles, excluding fuel, so the line haul only. The blue line is the rolling 7-day weighted average. And you can see that the green line is the rate view forecast out 35 days. And what we're doing here is putting an upper and lower band, or what we call error bands, giving you some of the forward-looking best and worst case scenarios. So let's start with the dry van market. Ratecast is predicting rates to decrease about 3 cents a mile out to the 2nd week, or actually the 1st week of November. Again, that's reasonably normal, but I think a lot of our forecast will change as this strike goes on the eastern Gulf Coast. So keep that in mind as you look at these forecasts. The high case forecast is looking for a 4 cent per mile lift out to early November. And then on the worst case scenario, it's looking at a 10 cent per mile decrease. In the refrigerated market, again, produce volumes are cooling. They were down last week. So again, we're seeing some lower demand in the spot rate market. Remember, the ratecast forecast weights seasonality much more heavily. Not unusual to see volumes fall off here in this transitionary period in the produce season. The refrigerated market is expecting a 2 cent per mile drop. On the ratecast side, a high of 5 cent per mile, which is the yellow line, and the low case scenario is looking at a 9 cent per mile drop. I expect that what you're seeing here is an upward inflection on ratecast towards the end of that forecast range. That's pretty much exactly what happens at the start of November. That's when we see Christmas tree season, fall produce, and fresh turkey start to move. So we'll expect that to turn up as we get out to the end of October. And in flatbed, ratecast is looking for an 8 cent per mile decrease out to 11.2. High case scenario still has rates down 3 cents a mile low case scenario, down 13 cents a mile. But of course, as we said at the start of the show, we do have a massive rebuilding effort underway in the southeast as a result of Hurricane Helene. I expect that will change things substantially by the time we get to our show this time next week. So, Chad, what are you seeing on the contract side of the market?
Yeah, it looks like continued good news for shippers and some pressure on carriers. So everything that Dean has covered is that broker to carrier perspective from our load board and spot rates. So what I'll cover here is the mix of contract rates and spot rates from our shippers perspective. So covering the dry van, here we have in blue 78% current mix of contract rates and 22% mix of spot rates. This trend goes all the way back to 2016. You can see that spot premium ratio, which is the percentage difference between spot rates and contract rates, at negative 10% and being depressed for over 2 years now. So and trending down. So supports the forecast that you just went over. So could have continued downward pressure. That spot premium ratio, for the market to start turning, we need to see that go positive. To where spot rates are up above contract rates. Moving on to temp control, apologize, lost my 2 data points here, but we're at 15% mix of spot rates currently on that last data point, slight rise on temp control, and that spot premium ratio is still at negative 10%, so it's still quite depressed. And then finally, on the flatbed market, a lot of variability in flatbed spot contract mix due to seasonality and short-term lanes. Currently 39%, so recent increase in spot mix, which aligns with the rates that you just showed there for the month of August and September, Dean. And the spot premium ratio still holding quite low at negative 8%. So continued pressure on rates, downward pressure, that is. Good news for shippers, not so great news for carriers. So that's a wrap on the shipper perspective.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Chad. Heather, let's bring you back in. One of the questions I wanted to ask you, amongst a range of questions, as we head into winter, which of course is just around the corner for a lot of us, how do you help shippers prepare for protecting freight from freeze with your heat track technology?
So that's a good question. October 1st is the first day of Protect from Freeze season. So this is the time when, sadly, we have to prepare for the cold weather. And, Midwest has quite a bit of that coming our way. What we really talk to our customers about the most is preparing us for their needs. And so we need to know where we need to put the capacity to make sure that we're ready to go when we do run into that snowstorm and the customer needs to ship something. We have some customers that will start listing their freight as Protect from Freeze right away. We need them to make sure it's on all the paperwork and also on the freight because, going across the dock, we don't always have the paperwork right next to the freight. So that's a critical piece. And then the other thing is when we are anticipating big storms, the more we can communicate with the customers and the more transparency we have on what they're going to need, the better. So our Midwest winters have gotten worse over the last 5 years and more extreme. And so we've taken extra steps to have blankets in the trucks for the drivers so that they've already got the insulated trailers and we've got the heaters on them. But when it gets to be that extreme, those heating units can't always keep up. So the drivers have blankets that they carry so they can keep the freight protected. And we've got heated warehouses that we can take it to hold on to it in case things are so extreme that we can't get it back out for delivery. But communication with the customer so that we know if they're going to have a lot of volume or if they're going to be able to hold it and wait for the extreme weather to pass is critical. But this is the time of the year where we're really just looking at who's going to have the volume so we can make sure we get the equipment in place.
Heather, LTL, Protect from Freeze, niche market, what are some of those most common commodities that you're hauling in this space?
Quite a bit of paint and chemicals. Those are the 2 big ones. And those are the types of things that they have to keep moving even when it gets cold. So another one is the medical industry. So we do saline and things like that, which is very critical. And some of that freight comes from a distance. So they will take it and pool it into some of our terminals. So it's truckloaded in. They can't stop it. So we need to be prepared for it, even if we are going to have extreme weather. We've gotten good at it. Last winter, we didn't have anything too crazy, but we've had some pretty extreme weather events over the last 5 years that have gotten us good at reacting to it. We see a lot of carriers out there that offer the protect from freeze, but most of them aren't moving their line haul on heated trailers. And, when the weather gets really cold, they just embargo the freight. So we have taken steps to make sure we can not have to embargo and make sure we can keep that freight protected no matter what the weather throws at us.
Can any reefers serve as a heat pump to heat the trailer, or does it take specialty equipment to do this?
Reefers can. We don't use reefers. We use heaters. The reefers, they can serve in a more extreme condition, but there aren't LTL carriers that run reefers. So that's more of a truckload type of event.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Heather, is there a particular temperature where you get to and you say this has to be protect from freeze?
Well, I mean, the only service that we offer is the protect from freeze. So we're just going to keep it from freezing. Now we do have some customers who want temp control, and it's hard to find that. We will move the freight and turn the heaters up higher to help protect that, but we really only guarantee we're going to not fall below 32 degrees.
Got it. Okay. So on the truckload side, though, that would be more risky because of the fact that they're using refrigeration units as opposed to heaters.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
We always saw a definite inflection in refrigerated rates as demand goes up, as the temperatures drop. There's almost an inverse relationship. But I can never figure out the temperature ambient point where there was this inflection point. It felt like it was about +7 degrees, but that was just by looking at charts without really any sort of scientific analysis.
Right. Where we start to really have to pull out the extreme measures is if we are below zero for 3 days in a row. So if you're just going to drop below zero for a day or two, it's not that big a deal. But once you get below zero 3 days in a row, we start looking at, do we need to hold on to some of that freight in the warehouses because it doesn't get a chance to heat back up, and the trailers are working pretty hard to keep it warm.
Yeah, I've not thought about the warehouse side of this, because in LTL that becomes a major factor. How do you heat big warehouses? What's the technology?
So what we do is we don't have a huge warehouse that it's going to be heated, but we have heated rooms at all of our terminals. So a couple of things we've started doing in the last few years, just as we're seeing the more extreme temperatures, is that we put curtains on the doors so that when the freight's moving in and out of the trucks, we're keeping the heat in there, because we learned that we were losing too much heat as we open the doors into the dock. And the terminals where we have the heated rooms, well, I mean, all of them we do, but some of them we have bigger rooms. We've actually sectioned off some of the terminal in some cases so that we can keep a smaller area warm, so that it doesn't cost quite as much to heat the whole huge dock, and then we don't get the doors opening up in the other areas. Then we added thermostats with alarms that will go off on the weekends in case we have to hold freight over the weekend. So again, with 1,300 trailers, we are the biggest heated carrier in the Midwest and the Mid-Atlantic. It's important that we take the extra steps to be able to do things the other carriers can't. And so with these thermostats and the units that will alert us on the weekends, we're able to pick up freight even on a Friday and not deliver it till Monday, where a lot of protect from freeze carriers they won't pick up on Thursdays, or they won't pick up on Fridays because they don't want to hold it over the weekends.
Right. Yeah. Chad, is this something that in your days running trucking companies and working with all of DAT's shippers, is this something that sort of bubbles up to the surface?
It's not something I've run into much. Yeah. So this is kind of new to me. So most of my LTL experience has just been dry. We moved a lot of pallets via LTL. So this is new. I do have a question in regards to the strike. So I assume you've heard there's a strike.
Yes.
And I know you're a CSCMP and you're about to go downstairs and hear a lot about it.
Yes.
But are you anticipating any impacts based on your commodity mix? I know you mentioned medical.
No, not that I can anticipate. If it goes on for a long time, we'll certainly, I'm sure, see the trickle effect. One of the things that I've seen is that there's produce that are going through these ports, and being in the Midwest, we serve a lot of ag companies, and so whenever the farmers get hurt, that trickles down and it affects our customers, which will affect us. I'm hoping it doesn't go on that long, so it won't be an issue. But I guess we'll all wait and see.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah, there was a good article out yesterday in the Wall Street Journal talking about asparagus coming in from South America. They were reverting to air cargo. When I looked at World ACD's data this morning, they're the global data carrier that or data provider that merges all of the air freight data into one platform. Those volumes are up slightly year over year, but there is an excess of belly cargo and air freighters that can come online. So air cargo is typically about 1% of total volume, but about 34% of value of goods shipped globally. So I think high value commodities, maybe retail, fashion, electronics, could see a flip over to the air cargo side. So I would anticipate a lot of urgent freight ending up at airports specifically at some point. The other data point, I talked to a friend of mine last night that runs a triaxle drop deck out of Nova Scotia. They bring lumber down, and they're expecting a lot of what he calls hurricane lumber demand to rebuild. And but on the way back, he normally calls into Baltimore and loads machinery, imported machinery from Asia or Europe. And he said that'll dry up completely. So it makes me think that there'll be a substantial lane imbalance occur here. And I think the port strike becomes more of a roll-on, roll-off break bulk crisis because all of our top 10 ports for break bulk and ro-ro are on the East Coast, whereas Baltimore is like the 13th largest port for containers. New York's the second largest. So I think the more this goes on, I think it'll be a fairly big impact on the automotive industry, given the proliferation of German automakers in the Southeast. They bring in a lot of engine components in every single month in containers. So that's going to be a pretty big deal for those guys.
It's an interesting point, the lost backhaul. So it's not just the commodity that's being imported or exported, but it's losing that backhaul is going to impact that head haul rate.
Yeah, because with a lot of those guys that run cross-border, they have to load back across the border. Although, as I found out last week, they don't always do that. A lot of the Canadian carriers are running intrastate. So they're running. Who's checking? Like so who's checking whether you're going to go back across the border? Apparently, no one. So so that'll happen, I think, as carriers look for freight. They'll try and do something back. But for carriers that run back into Nova Scotia, there's not a lot that goes across border back into that area. So you've got to build in some of those empty miles from maybe Augusta, Maine, all the way back up to Nova Scotia. So it becomes very problematic on the head haul, adds to the cost south, and of course the price of lumber goes up. So I expect that we'll see this unfold as the week goes on. I did notice the Teamsters jumped in and offered their support. There's also talk of West Coast ports offering some solidarity here if it drags on.
We don't need that.
Yeah, we don't need that. Heather, one question did come to mind, some chatter in some of our shipper roundtables about a strategy to save money for shippers. They talked about zone skipping. Is this something you're familiar with?
Yeah, and we don't get into a lot of it just being a regional carrier. But yeah, there's some savings in that.
Okay. So that's consolidating, moving line haul with a line haul third-party carrier, and then coordinating the LTL on the other end.
Correct.
So would you be a recipient of that?
Yes.
Once the line haul comes in, you would split it up? Okay.
Yep. So we've got, we've got a cross dock that we run for one of our customers, one of our biggest customers, where they're bringing in truckloads of LTL and we're taking it from there to take it out for delivery. So they do some of that. We consolidate freight in, but that's usually truckload volumes going, longer distance. So yeah, we do benefit from some of it.
Sure, that makes sense. Of all of your capacity in your network, how much of that is running line haul, or is it all running the LTL portion?
How much of our capacity is running line haul?
Yes.
So our line hauls are only internally. We're just running our line haul in our system at night.
Okay.
Yeah, everything we handle is LTL in the day.
All right, gotcha.
Yeah.
Heather, for those that don't know much about Dawn Transfer, how would you describe your geographic footprint?
We are the best in the Midwest. That's what we call ourselves. So we handle the entire Midwest area. Now we're part of the Pitt, Ohio Transportation Group. So Pitt, Ohio is our Mid-Atlantic piece. And then we've got Ross Express out on the East Coast. The advantage that we have is that we are a regional carrier, but we really can operate as a super regional. So we give that personal touch, but we can get the freight all the way out to Maine. And actually, when you talk about the Protect from Freeze, we go from Nebraska all the way to Maine, which is a pretty far reach for a Protect from Freeze carrier. But yeah, we're a Midwest carrier, which is why, we're heavy on ag, we're heavy on construction. We've got that personal touch. That's the big selling point that we have. If you look at where carriers are going with all the M&A and small carriers getting consumed by larger carriers, you start to lose the ability to use the regional carriers that really understand their customers' needs. Our customers are a big fish in a small pond, where, when you start working with the national carriers, you start to lose some of that.
Yeah. One last question before we wrap up. Talk about blankets. How many blankets would a trailer typically have for Protect from Freeze?
They usually takes 2 blankets to cover the whole back. They're thermal blankets that they can take, and they can fold them up and keep them up in the cabs. And then when they need them, they go back and put them on the trucks. Ideally, we'd like to not have to use them much. The heaters should do their jobs as long as we're moving, but that's just more for those extreme cases. And, we've got customers who are pumping out hundreds of truckloads a day of Protect from Freeze freight. And when it starts to get really cold, they came to us and said, we need a solution. We can't do embargoes because our production gets backed up and we have nowhere to store the product. We had some winters where they were loading trailers and leaving them in their yard and freezing full trailers of paint.
Right.
That's not good. So we've had to get creative and come up with solutions.
So the blankets literally go up against the back door. Is that what you're saying?
They just pull over the freight. So the drivers will take them up to the nose of the trailer and just pull them over the freight.
Oh, so they're full length blankets.
Yeah. Well, it takes 2 to cover the trailer. Yeah.
Oh, I get it. Okay. This is fascinating. I had no idea it was so complex.
It really is. And, when the customers were coming to us and saying, like, there were some times where we were starting to have to embargo more because we were getting more of that extreme weather, and we had tried to never embargo, but it's very important to protect that freight because it gets expensive and disruptive when you freeze the trailer freight. So they came to us and said, like, we need a solution, and we put our heads together, and it was really a lot of Googling, and just getting down into how are we gonna solve this problem, because carriers haven't figured it out to this point.
Yeah, this is a real Northern Hemisphere phenomenon. I'm used to the opposite, trying to pull 100 degrees down to like 30 with cantaloupe or something ridiculous.
But something else you don't think about needing to be protected from freeze is castings. So when they come out of the facility, if they hit that cold air, they rust right away. So that's when a lot of castings come out of Wisconsin, where it can get pretty cold, and that's one of the ones that we have to use our heated trailers on.
Castings as in the round things on the road? Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, that's fascinating. All right, Heather, this has been fantastic. Just before we wrap up, how can people get in contact with you if they'd like to know more about Heat Track and the other services Dawn offers?
You can come to our website, www.dorn.com, and all the information's on there about how you can contact us, become a customer. It's right on the front page, and you can ask any questions there.
Okay, thanks, Heather. Great to have you on. I look forward to bringing you back on later. Just a couple of shout outs. DATCon, don't forget, is on very soon, October 22 to 24 in Kansas City. You can still sign up. Go to dat.com/DATCom. Right, so that's it. Make sure you sign up for all your alerts. I'm here at Journal of Commerce today, the Inland Conference in Chicago. Heather's at CSCMP. Where is that, Heather?
In Nashville.
Okay. Yeah. Got it. All right. Well, we look forward to seeing and hearing more about that today. With that, another show's in the books. Be safe, everybody. Be nice to everybody. And we'll see you back here again at 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific next week.
Thank you.